Would you look at the actual size of this thing? It's practically vertical. How does it even function without falling over? Commander Lore asked, gesturing wildly with three of his upper appendages, while the fourth maintained a death grip on his stimulant beverage. Fleet Admiral Zixa leaned forward, her bioluminescent spots pulsing with an annoyed purple hue as she studied the holographic image. This is hardly the time for your xenobiological fascination, Lore. We just lost an entire assault division to these upright primates. Yeah, but have you considered how ridiculous they look? Lore continued, seemingly oblivious to the gravity of the situation. Balancing on two limbs. That's like trying to build a skyscraper on toothpicks. Evolutionary dead end, if you ask me. The war room of the Galactic Hegemony flagship. Inevitable conquest buzzed with nervous energy as various commanders and advisors flitted about, casting furtive glances at the central hologram, displaying their recent humiliating defeat. The creature at the center of the display rotated slowly, a pink-skinned biped with peculiar fur, isolated to the top of its head and occasionally elsewhere, dressed in what their intelligence suggested was rudimentary battle armor. A human. Dead. "And or not," Staff Intelligence Officer Vrax interjected, her eye-tox drooping with fatigue. "These bipeds just decimated our forces. 87% casualties, Lore. 87%. Well, obviously we underestimated them." Lork shrugged his upper shoulders while his lower set remained rigid in the formal military posture. Classic mistake. Won't happen again. Admiral Zixa slammed a tentacle on the hollow table, causing the image to flicker momentarily. It certainly won't happen again, because if it does, we'll all be answering to the Supreme Coordinator directly. Need I remind you what happened to the last fleet that failed to meet conquest quotas? A collective shudder ran through the assembled officers. Everyone knew about the infamous Pelgry incident. The former admiral was now reportedly working as a waste processor technician on a frontier mining colony. The hegemony was not known for its forgiving nature when it came to military failures. "Look," Zixa continued, calming herself with visible effort, her breathing sacs inflating and deflating in the rhythm taught at Officer Training Academy. "We need solutions, not observations about human physiology. The conquest of Earth is already behind schedule by 14 rotations. Lieutenant Graz, a young officer from the tactical division who had been quietly analyzing data in the corner, cleared his throat equivalent. "Ma'am, if I may, I've been reviewing the battle recordings from the planet's surface, and there's something concerning. More concerning than losing an entire division to primitives," Lore quipped. Graz ignored him. "The humans we engaged. They weren't wearing standard military uniforms, at least not according to our intelligence about Earth military organizations." Zixa's eye-tox straightened with interest. "Explain." "Well," Graz manipulated the hologram, zooming in on one of the humans from the battle. "This attire indicates they were part of something called Weekend Warriors or National Guard. It's a sort of part-time military force." A heavy silence fell over the war room. Part-time. Lore finally broke the silence, his stimulant beverage slipping from his grip and splashing onto the pristine floor. Nobody noticed, as in not their primary function. "Correct, sir," Graz continued, his voice modulation becoming higher with anxiety. "And based on communications we intercepted, this wasn't even their main force. They referred to themselves as a scout unit and were apparently just checking things out when our division engaged them." Admiral Zixa's bioluminescent spots turned, a pale, sickly yellow, the Mercian equivalent of turning ghost white. "Are you telling me we just threw our elite Vanguard division against what amounts to a human hobby group? That's one interpretation." "Yes, ma'am. Staring void. Someone," whispered from the back of the room. Lork, for once, had nothing witty to say. Staff Sergeant Mike Davies had seen some weird in his 15 years of military service, but this, a literal alien invasion during what was supposed to be a routine weekend training exercise, definitely took the cake. "Reynolds, I need that comm link. Up yesterday." Mike shouted over the sound of alien energy weapons sizzling through the air above their makeshift barricade. Working on it, Sarge Private First Class Reynolds shouted back, his fingers flying over the field communication device. But their tech is causing some kind of interference. Mike ducked as a particularly close bolt of whatever the hell that energy was scorched the air where his head had been a moment before. Around him, the men and women of Scout Unit 7, a ragtag bunch of weekend warriors who normally spent their civilian time as accountants, nurses, teachers, and IT specialists, were holding their own against what appeared to be honest-to-God aliens. "This is so damn cool," muttered Specialist Wilson, the unit's resident sci-fi nerd, as he lined up another shot with his rifle. The crack of the weapon was followed by a distant, distinctly inhuman shriek. I mean, terrifying, but also cool. Less talking, more shooting. Mike grunted, though privately he agreed. If you had to be involved in humanity's first contact with hostile aliens, it might as well be something you could brag about later, assuming there was a later. "Hey, Sarge," called out Corporal Lee from behind an overturned supply truck. "You think these are the same type of aliens that the government's been denying exist since Roswell?" "I think," Mike replied, pausing to squeeze off 3 well-placed shots that dropped an alien trying to flank their position, "that if the government knew these purple, squid-faced bastards existed, they'd have given us better weapons than these standard-issue rifles." It had started as a normal Saturday morning. Scout Unit 7 had been deployed to this remote area for a standard reconnaissance exercise, essentially a glorified camping trip with military jargon thrown in. Then the sky had torn open with an ominous rumble. And before anyone knew what was happening, alien ships were dissing troops that immediately opened fire. Fortunately for humanity, Scout Unit 7 happened to be in just the right place at just the wrong time, or perhaps it was the other way around, depending on your perspective. "Sarge got through to command," Reynolds shouted triumphantly, holding up the comm unit. Mike crawled over, keeping his head down. "This is Staff Sergeant Davies of Scout Unit 7. We are under attack by," he paused, realizing how ridiculous his next words would sound. "Hostile extraterrestrial forces requesting immediate backup and heavy artillery support." The response was predictable. "Say again, Scout Unit 7. "Did you say extraterrestrial?" Mike grabbed the comm unit. "Yes, goddammit. Aliens. Big purple ones with tentacles and energy weapons. They're trying to kill us. We're killing them back, and we could really use some help out here." There was a long pause. "Have you been drinking, Sergeant Davies?" Mike was saved from having to respond by another barrage of alien fire that sent everyone diving for cover. "Give me that," Specialist Wilson said, grabbing the comm unit. "Listen up, Command. This is Specialist Wilson. I've got video." He held up his smartphone, which had been recording the entire encounter. "Sending footage now, and trust me, not even Hollywood CGI is this good. We've got real aliens here, and they're not the friendly ET type." Minutes later, the comm unit crackled back to life. "Scout Unit 7, this is General Harrington. Your footage has been received and verified. Hold your position. All available forces are being mobilized. I repeat, hold your position." Mike exchanged glances with Wilson. All available forces sounded promising, but hold your position was military. Speak, for you're on your own for now. Try not to die. "Reynolds," Mike called out. "How's our ammo situation?" Reynolds grimaced. "Not great, Sarge. We packed for a weekend exercise, not the War of the Worlds." "All right, listen up." Mike gathered his unit around, keeping low behind their makeshift fortifications. "We've got unknown hostiles with superior technology, but so far they don't seem too bright tactically. They keep charging in formation instead of utilizing cover, which means they're either inexperienced or overconfident. Or both," Lee suggested. "Or both," Mike agreed. "Either way, we use it against them. We're outgunned, but not outmatched. Standard guerrilla tactics. Hit and move. Don't stay in one spot long. Enough for them to zero in and conserve ammo. Make every shot count." Private Miller, the youngest of the group and on only his second training exercise ever, raised a shaky hand. "Sarge, what if they've invaded everywhere? What if this is happening all over the world?" It was the question they'd all been thinking, but hadn't voiced. Mike looked at the scared faces of his unit. Ordinary citizens who signed up for the National Guard to help during natural disasters and earn some money for college, not to be humanity's first line of defense against an alien invasion. "Then we make these purple bastards regret choosing Earth," Mike said firmly. "But for now, we focus on what we know. We're here. They're here. And we're not letting them past us. Clear?" A chorus of "clear, Sarge," answered him with varying degrees of confidence. "All right, then." Mike checked his rifle. "Let's show these aliens what happens when you mess with humans on a weekend." Back aboard the inevitable Conquest, the mood had shifted from shock to panic as reports continued to stream in from the surface. "They've adapted to our energy weapon. Signatures," Science Officer Krell reported, her voice pitched higher than normal. "They're using the most primitive projectile weapons Our division had over 300 combat-trained warriors, 342. Krell corrected automatically, then shrank back as Lore glared at her. Admiral Zixa paced the command deck, her tentacles clasped tightly behind her back. "This is unacceptable. Completely unacceptable. We are the Galactic Hegemony. We have conquered 17 star systems. We will not be humiliated by primitives who haven't even achieved interstellar travel." "Ma'am," Communications Officer Zilb interrupted, "we're receiving reports that human reinforcements are converging on the battle site. Their communications indicate a full military response is being organized." The Admiral froze. "How long do we have at their primitive vehicle speeds?" "Perhaps 2 of their hours before the first significant forces arrive." Zixa made a decisive gesture. "Enough of this ground assault nonsense. Prepare the orbital bombardment array. We'll wipe out this scout unit and establish a proper beachhead elsewhere." "Admiral." Strategic Officer Voon spoke up for the first time, his voice soft, but carrying a note of warning that made everyone turn toward him. Voon was the oldest officer aboard, a veteran of countless campaigns, and when he spoke, even Zixa listened. "I would strongly advise against orbital bombardment at this juncture." "Explain," Zixa demanded. "If we deploy orbital weapons, we reveal our full capabilities too early. Based on intercepted communications, humanity is still unaware of our fleet size and capabilities. They know only that there are alien troops on the ground. An orbital strike would alert them to our presence in their orbit, giving them time to prepare whatever orbital defenses they might possess." "Their orbital capabilities are primitive," Zixa protested. "A few satellites in a small station." "With respect, Admiral," Voon continued calmly, "we thought their ground forces were primitive too." An uncomfortable silence fell over the command deck. Furthermore, Voon added, "The loss of a single division, while regrettable, is not strategically significant. But revealing our orbital presence prematurely could jeopardize the entire invasion plan." Admiral Zixa's spots pulsed with angry reds and oranges, but she couldn't argue with the strategic logic. "Fine, no orbital bombardment yet, but I want a solution to this problem immediately." "Perhaps," Lore suggested cautiously, "we should try to capture some humans for study. If we understand how a mere scout unit could defeat our division, we might better prepare for their actual military forces." Zixa pointed a tentacle at him. "Make it happen, Commander. Assemble a capture team immediately." Lork saluted and hurried off, secretly relieved to have a reason to leave the increasingly tense command deck. As he strode through the corridors of the inevitable conquest, he couldn't help but wonder if the Supreme Coordinator had somehow known what they would be facing. The Hegemony's propaganda always portrayed conquered species as primitive, easily overwhelmed by superior hegemony technology and tactics. But what if that wasn't always the case? What if some species fought back effectively? Lork shook his head, dismissing such heretical thoughts. The Hegemony always won. always. This was just a temporary setback. Still, as he assembled his capture team, Lore found himself being much more thorough in his preparations than usual. "Contact 10D," Corporal Lee called out, his voice tense but controlled. Mike swiveled and spotted movement among the trees about 100 yards out. The aliens had adapted somewhat over the past hour, becoming more cautious, using cover and spreading out rather than moving in tight formations. They were learning that wasn't good. "They're flanking around to the east," Mike observed. "Wilson, Lee with me. We're going to set up a crossfire. Reynolds, you're in charge here. Keep their attention focused forward." "Roger that, Sarge," Reynolds acknowledged. Mike and his 2 soldiers slipped away, moving quietly through the underbrush. The aliens had landed in a forested area that Scout Unit 7 knew intimately from previous exercises. A home field advantage that had so far helped them hold their own against technologically superior forces. "I still can't believe this is happening," Wilson whispered as they moved into position. "Actual aliens on Earth during my 1 weekend a month. What are the odds?" "Less talking, more moving," Mike hissed, though. Privately, he was thinking the same thing. Of all the scout units in all the National Guard in all the United States, the aliens had to run into his. Either this was the worst luck in history, or as his grandmother would have said, they were exactly where fate needed them to be. They reached a small ridge that would give them a good angle on the aliens' attempted flanking maneuver and set up position. "On my mark," Mike whispered, sighting down his rifle at the nearest alien. In the hours since first contact, they'd discovered that while the aliens' body armor was resistant to glancing shots, direct hits to their central mass or their odd tube-like breathing apparatus were effective. The aliens moved into the clearing below them, obviously thinking they were being stealthy. There were about 15 of them, more heavily armored than the previous groups, moving with what appeared to be a definite purpose rather than just attacking blindly. "Something's different about this bunch," Lee murmured. "They're not just charging in." Mike nodded, a cold feeling settling in his gut. The enemy was adapting, which meant they were intelligent and capable of changing tactics. Not good for the long term, but they just needed to hold out until reinforcements arrived. "Steady," Mike whispered as the alien group moved further into the clearing. "Steady, Mark." 3 rifles cracked simultaneously, and 3 aliens dropped immediately. The rest scattered for cover with surprising speed, returning fire with their energy weapons. "Down!" Mike shouted as energy bolts sizzled overhead, scorching the trees behind them. "Relocate 3 and move." It was a practiced maneuver. 3 shots, then immediately changed position to avoid return fire. The 3 soldiers scrambled away from their initial firing position, just as concentrated energy fire reduced it to smoldering vegetation. But as they moved to their secondary position, Mike realized something was wrong. The alien return fire wasn't just wild suppression, it was deliberately hurting them, cutting off certain escape routes with well-placed shots. "It's a trap!" he shouted, just as something small and spherical landed near them with a soft thud. Lee reacted first, diving forward and swatting the object away with his rifle. It detonated in midair, not with the expected explosion, but with a blinding flash and a strange humming noise that seemed to vibrate through Mike's very bones. He hit the ground hard, his muscles suddenly refusing to cooperate. Beside him, Wilson and Lee were similarly incapacitated, their bodies twitching as they fought against whatever effect the alien device had unleashed. Through blurred vision, Mike saw alien figures approaching cautiously, weapons trained on the 3 paralyzed humans. "Tactical! Retreat!" Mike managed to grunt out, though he knew it was futile. They couldn't move, let alone retreat. The last thing he saw before losing consciousness was an alien face leaning over him, its tentacles twitching with what might have been curiosity or triumph. It was impossible to tell. When Mike regained consciousness, his first thought was that he'd somehow been transported into a bad sci-fi movie. He was restrained on some kind of examination table, surrounded by medical equipment that looked both advanced and distinctly non-human in design. Wilson. "Lee," he called out. His voice, "Sow, I'm here, Sarge," came Wilson's voice from somewhere to his right. "They've got us strapped down pretty good." "Lee's here, too," Wilson added after a moment. "He's still out cold, though." Mike tested his restraints, some kind of energy field that allowed slight movement, but prevented him from sitting up or reaching anything important. "Any idea where we are?" "Pretty sure we're on their ship," Wilson replied, sounding remarkably calm given the circumstances. "They took us up in some kind of transport. I was fading in and out, but I saw Earth getting smaller below us." Mike absorbed this information with as much stoicism as he could muster. They were prisoners on an alien spacecraft, humanity's first abductees in an actual alien invasion. "Great. Any sign of what they want with us?" he asked. "Well, they haven't started the anal probing yet, so that's something," Wilson quipped, then immediately sobered. "Sorry, Sarge. Inappropriate humor as a stress response." "No, keep it up," Mike said. "I could use the distraction while I figure out how we're going to escape and get back to our unit." Wilson made a sound that was half laugh, half snort. "Escape from an alien spaceship. With all due respect, Sarge, I think that might be a bit outside our weekend warrior training." "Probably," Mike agreed. "But since when has lack of training stopped Americans from doing the improbable?" Before Wilson could respond, a door hissed open, and several aliens entered the room. Mike recognized one from their insignia as probably being an officer of some kind. They'd started identifying rank markings during the battle. "Greetings, humans," the alien officer said in perfect, slightly accented English, its words emanating from a small device attached to what Mike assumed was the alien equivalent of a throat. "I am Commander Lore of the Galactic Hegemony. You are now prisoners of war and will be treated according to the Hegemony's conquered species protocol." "Well, that sounds ominous," Mike replied, trying to project a confidence he didn't entirely feel. "Staff Sergeant Mike Davies, United States National Guard. According to Earth's Geneva Convention, prisoners of war have certain rights, including yonding strange in the alien environment." "Merely with primitive projectile weapons and what training?" Mike shrugged as much as his restraints would allow. "That, and we really don't like being shot at by aliens on our day off." Admiral Zixa was not having a good day. What should have been a routine first-stage planetary conquest was turning into a potential career ender, and the latest report from Commander Lore wasn't helping. "What do you mean they're not enhanced?" she demanded, her tentacles flailing in agitation. Lore's holographic projection flickered slightly. "Exactly that, Admiral. Our detailed scans confirm they are completely standard specimens of the species. No genetic modifications, no cybernetic implants, not even significant pharmaceutical enhancements beyond mild stimulants they call caffeine and energy drinks." That's not possible," Zixa insisted. "They can't be out fighting our troops as baseline organisms." "The evidence suggests otherwise," Lore replied. "Furthermore, interrogation reveals something even more concerning. These soldiers are indeed part-time warriors, as we suspected. Their primary occupations are civilian. One repairs computing devices, another educates juvenile humans, and the leader apparently manages supply logistics for a commercial entity." Admiral Zixa sank into her command chair, her bioluminescence dimming to a muted blue of distress. "Are you telling me that a group of part-time amateur warriors with civilian day jobs managed to achieve an 87% casualty rate against our elite Vanguard division?" "Yes," Admiral Lure confirmed. "And according to their statements, they are considered a relatively standard unit, not especially distinguished within their military structure." A heavy silence fell over the command deck as the implications sank in. "If these are their part-time forces," Strategic Officer Vaughn said quietly, What are their full-time professional soldiers capable of? The question hung in the air like a toxic cloud. There's something else, Admiral, Lore continued reluctantly. The humans are aware they've been abducted. One of them, the specialist named Wilson, asked if we'd informed their command structure that they've been taken prisoner. Of course we haven't, Zixa snapped. Why would we communicate with an inferior species we intend to conquer? Well, Lore's projection shifted uncomfortably. He suggested that if their command doesn't hear from them soon, they will assume the worst. And how did he put it? Bring the full might of the United States military down on our alien asses. Is that a threat? Zixa demanded. I believe it was intended as a helpful warning, Lore replied. He seemed genuinely concerned for our welfare. Admiral Zixa scoffed. The arrogance, as if their primitive military could threaten the hegemony fleet. Admiral Communications Officer Zilb interrupted urgently. We're detecting massive movements of Earth military forces converging on the initial contact point. They've established a perimeter and are deploying what appear to be heavy weapons. Additionally, their global communication networks are buzzing with emergency broadcasts. Show me, Zixa ordered. Zixa. The main view screen shifted to show satellite imagery of Earth's surface, where indeed there was significant military activity around the area where their division had been defeated. More concerning were the images from other locations. Military bases erupting with activity, naval vessels changing course, aircraft taking to the skies. They're mobilizing globally, Krell observed. Not just locally. How? Zixa demanded. How did they alert their entire planet so quickly? It appears, Zilb said, checking the data, that something called social media spread footage of our troops almost instantly across their information networks. Their governments initially tried to suppress the information, but have now shifted to emergency response protocols. Admiral Zixa stared at the escalating human response with growing horror. This was not how planetary conquests were supposed to proceed. By the time a species realized they were under full attack, the hegemony was supposed to have already established multiple beachheads and disrupted global communications. Admiral Voon said gravely, I suggest we consider a strategic withdrawal to reassess. This species is not responding according to the standard conquest models. Retreat before the invasion has properly begun. Zixa's spots flashed crimson with outrage. The Supreme Coordinator would have us all demoted to waste management. With respect, Admiral Voon persisted. Continuing with the standard invasion protocol could result in casualties far beyond acceptable parameters. Look at the data. If a scout unit could inflict such damage, what will their coordinated military response achieve? Zixa's tentacles twisted in agitation as she considered the options. The hegemony did not retreat, but neither did it throw forces into guaranteed destruction. There was a difference between strategic withdrawal and defeat, she told herself. Commander Lore, she addressed the still-waiting hologram. What is your assessment of the human prisoners? Could they be useful as hostages or for further intelligence? Lork hesitated. They are unusual, Admiral. Despite their situation, they maintain a curious attitude, combining defiance with something they call gallows humor. The one named Wilson has been making what I believe are references to their entertainment media about alien invasions, while Sergeant Davies has been systematically memorizing everything he sees, presumably for intelligence purposes should he escape. And do they seem afraid? Zixa asked. Concerned? Yes. Afraid? Lork's eye talks drooped slightly. Not as much as would seem appropriate given their circumstances. Admiral Zixa made her decision. Prepare a full strategic withdrawal. We will return to Hegemon space and report our findings. This species requires further study before a proper conquest strategy can be formulated. A collective sigh of relief passed through the command deck. And the prisoners? Lore asked. Zixa considered briefly. Standard protocol would be to eliminate them to prevent intelligence leakage, but in this case, return them. Their absence has clearly been noticed, and eliminating them might provoke an even stronger response. Besides, what could they possibly report that would help them against our technology? So let me get this straight, General Harrington said, rubbing his temples as if fighting a migraine. You and your men were abducted by aliens, taken aboard their spaceship, interrogated, and then just returned. And during this entire experience, Specialist Wilson here was quoting Independence Day at them. Mike sat stiffly at attention in the debriefing room, still wearing the same dirty uniform he'd had on during the battle and subsequent abduction. Beside him, Wilson had the good sense to look slightly embarrassed. "In my defense, sir," Wilson said, "I was trying to maintain morale while gathering intelligence on their capabilities. By asking if they'd seen the movie Where Earth Kicks Alien Ass," the general asked incredulously. "It seemed relevant to the situation, sir." General Harrington looked like he was reconsidering every life choice that had led him to this moment. "And you believe they withdrew their forces because they seemed genuinely surprised by our effectiveness, sir," Mike replied. "Based on their questions and reactions, I believe they expected minimal resistance. When Scout Unit 7 inflicted heavy casualties, it threw their entire invasion plan into disarray." The general leaned back in his chair, studying the three returned soldiers. "Do you realize what you're saying, Sergeant? That a single National Guard scout unit effectively stopped an alien invasion?" "Not stopped, sir," Mike corrected carefully. "Delayed. Commander Lore made it very clear they were conducting a strategic withdrawal to reassess. They'll be back, just with a different approach and probably a lot more firepower," Lee added. General Harrington was silent for a long moment, processing this information. Around the debriefing table, various intelligence officers and scientific advisors who had been hastily assembled were scribbling notes or exchanging meaningful glances. "The good news," Mike continued, "is that we learned quite a bit about their technology, command structure, and tactical doctrine during our time aboard their vessel. They were surprisingly careless about what they let us see." "Arrogance," Wilson suggested. "They still think of us as primitives, just ones that unexpectedly bite back." "That tracks with their behavior during the ground engagement," Lee agreed. "They started with straight-ahead assault tactics, like they expected us to panic at the sight of them. When that didn't work, they had to improvise. And that's when they decided to capture you for study," the general concluded. Mike nodded. "Yes, sir. I believe they're used to conquering species with minimal resistance. They seem to have an established protocol for it. A galactic empire of bullies," Wilson muttered. "Specialist," the general warned, though without much heat. "Sorry, sir. Galactic Hegemony of bullies." Despite the gravity of the situation, a few chuckles escaped from the junior officers present. General Harrington sighed deeply. "In my 30 years of military service, I never thought I'd be debriefing soldiers on alien tactics and technology, but here we are." He straightened in his chair. "I want full reports from each of you. Every detail you can remember about their weapons, defenses, ship layout, everything. Our scientific teams will need all the information they can get if we're going to prepare for their return." "Yes, sir." The three soldiers responded in unison. "And Sergeant Davies," the general added, "while I can't officially commend you for fighting off an alien invasion during a routine weekend exercise, mainly because no one would believe the combination wasn't a joke, I want you to know that Scout Unit 7's, our xenopsychologists believe they may be the most warfare-oriented species we have encountered." "Explain," the coordinator demanded. "Their recorded history is essentially a continuous series of conflicts between their own subdivisions." Lore elaborated, grateful for the chance to present the evidence he had spent months compiling. "They fight over resources, ideology, territory, religion. Sometimes for reasons even they struggle to articulate. They have developed weaponry specifically to kill each other with ever-increasing efficiency. And yet, despite this, or perhaps because of it, they have advanced technologically at a rate far exceeding the standard development curve." The Supreme Coordinator's spots pulsed thoughtfully. "And you believe this makes them a significant threat?" Supreme One, with all due respect. Lore said carefully, knowing his next words could either advance his career or end it. I believe they represent not just a threat, but potentially an existential one to our standard conquest methodology. The Supreme Coordinator's spots flashed with alarming intensity, a sign of either great anger or great interest. In this case, Lore couldn't tell which made it all the more terrifying. Existential threat, the Coordinator repeated slowly, savoring the words like an exotic delicacy. Strong language from a junior commander. Admiral Zixa did not share. Your assessment. Lork suppressed a grimace. Admiral Zixa had predictably done everything possible to shift blame for the failed invasion onto her subordinates. Her official report had characterized the Earth incident as an unexpected tactical anomaly caused by insufficient intelligence gathering by the advance team. The fact that she herself had commanded that advance team was conveniently minimized. Admiral Zixa did not spend time in close proximity to the humans, Supreme One, Lore replied diplomatically, nor did she witness their response when they believed their comrades had been captured. Ah, yes. The Coordinator leaned back, gesturing with a languid tentacle for Lore to continue. Tell me again about this response. Lore activated his data pad, projecting a series of images into the chamber's holographic display system. Within 6 of their hours following the abduction of just 3 individuals from their scout unit, the humans had mobilized military forces across their entire planet. Conventional forces established a perimeter around the initial contact site, while special operations units began systematic search patterns. The images shifted to show human spacecraft launching. More concerning, they accelerated several planned space missions, adapting them for military purposes. Our observers noted weapons being fitted to civilian spacecraft at an almost impossible speed, as if they had been designing such conversions as a contingency for decades, indicating foresight. The Coordinator mused. They anticipated an extraterrestrial threat. Yes, Supreme One, Lore confirmed. Their cultural records are filled with scenarios involving hostile alien contact. They have been rehearsing for us in a sense for generations. The Coordinator's spots pulsed thoughtfully. Continue. Most alarming was their information warfare response. Lork brought up new images showing human communication systems and data networks. Rather than attempting to suppress knowledge of our existence, their governments rapidly transitioned to open acknowledgement, unified planetary defense coordination, and what they termed species-wide mobilization. Industrial production was redirected toward military applications within days. Lork paused, gathering courage for his most controversial conclusion. Supreme One, the humans' response suggests they have been psychologically preparing for extraterrestrial conflict for generations through their entertainment media, scientific speculation, and military contingency planning. They adapted to the reality of our existence not with panic, but with something almost resembling eagerness. Eagerness? The Coordinator's eye-talk straightened with interest. Their recovered communications indicate a species that has long imagined this scenario, Lore explained. When faced with the actual prospect of alien invasion, they responded not with the typical disorganization and denial we expect from pre-Gemini species, but with coordinated global action that transcended their usual factional conflicts. The Coordinator was silent for a long moment. The chamber's other attendants, high-ranking hegemony officials and strategists, shifted uncomfortably in the silence. "And your recommendation?" the Coordinator finally asked. Lork took a deep breath. "A complete reassessment of our approach to this species. Either commit overwhelming force far beyond our standard conquest protocol, or consider a diplomatic approach." And the chamber erupted in shocked murmurs. The hegemony did not do diplomatic approaches with pre-space faring species. It conquered them as it had done 17 times before. "Silence," the Coordinator commanded, and the chamber instantly quieted. "Commander Lore, are you suggesting we treat these humans as equals?" "Not as equals, Supreme One, Lore carefully clarified, but as a species that may be more valuable as allies than as subjects. Their martial prowess, adaptability, and industrial capacity could serve the hegemony's interests more effectively through cooperation than through costly subjugation. The Supreme Coordinator rose from the ceremonial throne, causing everyone in the chamber to prostrate themselves automatically. Lork touched his head to the floor, tentacles spread in the traditional posture of submission, wondering if he had just talked himself into execution or promotion. Commander Lore, the coordinator's voice rumbled above him. You will assemble a detailed analysis team and prepare a comprehensive strategic report on all possible approaches to the human species, conquest, containment, and yes, even diplomatic scenarios. Lore's spots flashed with shock before he could control them. Yes, Supreme One. In the meantime, the coordinator continued. All further direct contact with Earth is forbidden until we better understand what we are dealing with. There was a pause, and then almost as an afterthought. Admiral Zixa is relieved of her command, effective immediately. Commander Lore, you are promoted to Acting Fleet Admiral to oversee this analysis project. Lorca's breathing sacs nearly seized up in shock. A double-rank promotion, unheard of. Rise, Acting Admiral Lore, the coordinator commanded. You will have whatever resources you require for this task. The hegemony does not make the same mistake twice. Thank you, Supreme One, Lork said as he rose, trying to keep his tentacles from trembling visibly with a mix of relief and dread. I will begin immediately. As the newly minted admiral left the chamber, his mind was already racing. He would need the best xenopsychologists, military analysts, and cultural interpreters in the hegemony. And perhaps most importantly, he would need to review everything they had learned from those 3 human soldiers during their brief captivity, particularly that odd warning from the one called Wilson. We've been making movies about kicking alien ass for decades. Don't make us turn those movies into documentaries. At the time, Lore had dismissed it as bizarre human humor. Now he wasn't so sure. You know what really gets me? Mike said, taking a swig from his beer. 6 months ago, nobody had ever heard of Staff Sergeant Mike Davies. Now I can't go to the grocery store without someone asking for my autograph. He was sitting on the porch of his newly purchased house, courtesy of his suddenly improved financial situation as one of the heroes of First Contact, watching the sunset with Wilson and Lee, who had dropped by for their now traditional Friday evening get-together. At least you look good on camera, Wilson complained good-naturedly. Every time they show footage from the congressional hearings, I look like I'm having a panic attack. You were having a panic attack, Lee pointed out, reaching for another beer from the cooler between them. We all were. Difference is Mike here knows how to hide it better. Mike chuckled. 15 years of service teaches you how to look calm while internally screaming. The 3 men sat in comfortable silence for a moment, watching as the sky turned spectacular shades of orange and pink. In the distance, the silhouette of a military aircraft, one of the new models hastily developed in the aftermath of the alien encounter, streak across the horizon. Things had changed dramatically in the 6 months since Scout Unit 7's unexpected clash with the Galactic Hegemony. Earth had united with unprecedented speed and purpose, redirecting vast resources toward planetary defense and space capabilities. The lingering threat of the aliens' return hung over humanity like a sword of Damocles. But rather than paralyzing society with fear, it had galvanized a spirit of innovation and cooperation that few would have thought possible before. You think they're coming back? Lee asked, voicing the question that was never far from any of their minds. Mike stared thoughtfully at the darkening sky. Definitely. The question is when and how. And whether they've learned their lesson, Wilson added. I mean, they seemed pretty shocked that their super-advanced troops got their asses handed to them by weekend warriors. Don't sell yourself short, Mike said. Weekend warriors who happen to be damn good at their jobs. Lee raised his beer in a toast. To Scout Unit 7, the part-time soldiers who started an interplanetary incident. They clinked bottles, grinning. "You know," Wilson said after taking a long sip, "I've been thinking about something Commander Lore said when they were returning us. Remember how he asked if all human military units were as martially proficient as ours?" Mike nodded. "And you told him we were pretty average, maybe even below average compared to the professional units." "Right," Wilson continued. "And he got that weird pulsing thing going with his spots. I think we genuinely terrified him with the idea that we were just the B team. Psychological warfare at its finest." Lee chuckled. Mike's phone buzzed with a notification. He glanced at it and sat up straighter. "Speaking of which," he said, showing them the screen, "guess who just got reactivated? For a special assignment?" Wilson leaned forward to read the message. "No way. They're putting Scout Unit 7 back together. I thought we were permanently relegated to the lecture circuit and media appearances." "Apparently not," Mike said, scanning the rest of the message. "General Harrington wants us specifically for something called Project First Response. Classified, obviously. They're preparing for the aliens' return." Lee said, suddenly serious. Mike nodded. "And they want the people with first-hand experience leading the way." "Great," Wilson groaned, though there was an undercurrent of excitement in his voice. And here I was, just getting used to being a civilian again. "Come on," Mike said, clapping him on the shoulder. "Admit it. You've been bored out of your mind giving the same talk about alien physiology to eager cadets." "Maybe a little," Wilson conceded with a grin. "Think they figured out how to reverse engineer those energy weapons yet?" "If they have, I bet we'll be the first to test them," Lee said. Mike looked back up at the sky, now revealing the first stars of evening. Somewhere up there, he knew the aliens were regrouping, rethinking, planning their next move. But this time, Earth wouldn't be caught by surprise. This time, humanity would be ready. "You know what the funny thing is?" Mike mused. "If they had attacked literally anywhere else that day, things might have gone very differently. Lucky for Earth. They ran into us instead," Wilson said. Mike shook his head. "Lucky for them, more like. Can you imagine if they dropped their troops near an Army Ranger unit or the Marines? Hell, even regular Army would have hit them harder than we did. And yet, we're the ones who made first contact history," Lee said with wonder in his voice. "A bunch of weekend warriors." To the weekend warriors, Mike raised his bottle again. "Part-time soldiers, full-time badasses." As they toasted, a shooting star, or perhaps something else, stray across the darkening sky, a brief reminder that Earth was now undeniably part of a much larger and more dangerous galactic community. But if the aliens thought humanity would be an easy conquest, they had another thing coming. After all, if a single National Guard scout unit could derail their invasion plans, what would happen when they faced the full might of a united Earth? Mike had a feeling the Galactic Hegemony was about to find out the hard way that humans were the wrong species to mess with, even on their days off. Deep in the secure analysis center aboard the Hegemony command vessel, Inevitable Victory, hastily renamed from Inevitable Conquest, following the Earth debacle. Acting Admiral Lore reviewed the latest simulation results with growing concern. "Run it again," he ordered the tactical officer. "Adjust parameter set for beta. Assume the humans have successfully reverse-engineered our energy weapon technology." The holographic display flickered, showing a new simulation of a hegemon invasion, force engaging with Earth defenses. The results were troubling. Projected casualty rates exceed acceptable parameters by 347%. The tactical AI reported dispassionately. Laurie, his tentacles drooping with fatigue. He'd been running simulations for weeks, and none of them showed the clear path to victory that hegemony conquest operations typically enjoyed. "Admiral," his assistant said hesitantly, "the xenopsychology team has completed their comprehensive analysis of human cultural records. Their report is unusual." "Define unusual," Lore said wearily. "They believe humans may be the only species we've encountered that has been psychologically preparing themselves for alien invasion through cultural narratives for generations before achieving spaceflight. Lore considered this. You mean their entertainment media? These movies and television shows the prisoners mentioned? Yes, Admiral. The team believes these narratives have essentially inoculated humans against the psychological shock that typically accompanies first contact with a hostile advanced species. They were expecting us, in a sense. Lorca's spots pulsed with a thoughtful blue glow. So when we arrived, rather than experiencing paralytic fear or denial, they immediately moved to an organized defensive posture. Yes, the assistant confirmed. It's unprecedented in our conquest history. Lork brought up an image from the prisoner interrogation recordings. The human called Wilson, speaking with that peculiar expression they called a smile, despite being restrained on an alien examination. Table. You know, Wilson had said casually during questioning, in almost all our stories, the aliens who come to Earth thinking they're all superior and stuff end up getting their asses kicked. Just something to think about. At the time, Lore had dismissed it as primitive bravado. Now, reviewing the simulation results and psychological analyses, he wondered if it had been a warning. Prepare a preliminary report for the Supreme Coordinator, Lore decided. Recommendation: diplomatic contact rather than conquest. These humans may be more valuable as allies than subjects. That's highly irregular, Admiral, his assistant said, spots flashing with surprise. So are these humans, Lore replied, staring at the simulation results. And I, for one, would rather not go down in Hegem any history as the Admiral who started a war we couldn't win. As he turned away from the display, Lork found himself remembering something else Wilson had said during his captivity. The thing about humans, Commander Squidface, is that we've been fighting each other for our entire history. We're really, really good at it, and we always root for the underdog. So if you guys come back looking for a fight, well, just remember you're not fighting a scout unit anymore. Lork had a feeling the human hadn't been exaggerating. Oh. And one more thing for the report, Lore added as an afterthought. Recommend immediate classification upgrade for planet Earth from standard conquest target to approach with extreme caution. Better safe than sorry when dealing with a species whose part-time military forces could decimate elite hegemony troops. The Supreme Coordinator might not like it, but even the mighty Galactic Hegemony had to recognize when they'd underestimated an opponent. And Lork had a nagging suspicion they'd only scratched the surface of what humans were truly capable of. Perhaps, just perhaps, this was one planet the hegemony would be better off befriending than conquering. After all, if their weakened warriors could do that kind of damage. Lork shuddered to think what their professional soldiers might accomplish, if truly provoked. The end.